we get like the bedrock down, we can fill that
That's my
up.
word, by the way.
Is it?
You better communicate.
Bedrock?
Bedrock. I use that all the time. That's my ultimate level of aspiration. To arrive at bedrock. I've been very fortunate in having a number of seriously perceptive persons comment upon my work. As I become less and less inclined toward self-disclosure, my pleasure in another's response to my work has increased. Kevin Brady has written on my work with deep insight. His feeling for language and skill in its employment surpasses any effort I have made on my own behalf. I consider his perceptions definitive respecting my intentions, and will quote from his 1996 text for my works catalog throughout this presentation. I've come to believe that painting and the need for it expresses nothing more critical than the spiritual condition of its author. The creative works we're about to see embody years of observation and thought about the sea-surrounded landmass of Cape Ann on Massachusetts' North Shore. Folly Point, in full view outside my window, has been an inspirational companion for over 40 years, and more recently, a bend in the road near a neighbor's house has fired my curiosity. I've haunted the Cape's granite quarries, acquiring a feeling for contradictory forces in the play of rock and water. The woods near home and the tangled wilds of Dogtown have revealed to me the mysterious convergence of man's hand and nature. Further reaches are the salt marshes of Essex and Ipswich, all the way to Newburyport, or south to Salem, on down to Providence and my deepest roots, those extending to Italy and the traditions that continue to shape this vast amalgam. This is the real subject, the defining style. Drawing makes everything possible for me, and my drawing begins in sketchbooks. Gloucester, Florence, Blowing Rock, Rome, etc. I depend on my observations of reality, natural, man-made, or both, and move forward with more freedom from there. Every sketch provides only, in essence, seen as a manifestation of potential. Something has been seen, but not yet understood. I'm reminded of the last stanza of Wallace Stevens' early poem, The Snowman, and I quote it: "For the listener who listens in the snow and nothing himself beholds nothing that is not there, and the nothing that is."
Seeing the Gloucester landscape that has inspired Castagnacci for decades allows a path into his work previously inaccessible. With the studio perched in view of the ocean, his footpaths beat trails to dramatically chiseled quarries scattered along the coast. The Howey and Bianchini quarries frame a daily walk, but Halibut Point is in the blood. Massive walls of cut rock form its edges, and from there the ocean can be seen. If magic exists in a physical form, it's Halibut Point. The more I contemplate the complexity of relationships found there, the more I understand not the general attraction to that place, but Castagnacci's in particular. In some sense, it is who he is, a synthesized contradiction. Two bodies of water, one fresh and contained, the other salty and infinite, unearth a constant negotiation between the regulator and the regulated.
The Folly Cove drawings suggest human meanings which come in just under the threshold of intelligibility, but register nonetheless. Folly Cove presents a scenic intersection of earth, sea, and sky, suggesting a kind of natural join, which Castagnacci has likened to dovetailing in a beautiful piece of woodwork. Each drawing in the series takes the land as a fixed point of reference, a symbol of permanence as the otherwise changing cove takes on different dispositions. Pictorially, it is a plane of water, shifting from static inertia to dynamic upheaval. Its repose coincides with signs of human settlement. Small, barely articulated structures on the shore provide a human scale. Elsewhere, the cove is consumed in a broad sweep of forces which excludes human presence. A span of water angles in, driving the tide against the land. Triangles twist like a wrangling of vectors, or a structural diagram of the weather, pressing here toward the shore and sliding there toward the horizon. As the image becomes less landscapic, it is freed from the scene at hand. It becomes more frontal, less subject to gravity. The real is only the base, Wallace Stevens wrote, but it is the base. The abstraction of forms seeks a viability independent of its basis in nature. The triangles hover as in a mist or field of waves. As structures of the imagination, they are neither solid nor insubstantial. It is in these images that the triangles are most closely matched, balanced as if the geometric and the expressive, the fixed and the ephemeral, had achieved a kind of equipoise, suspending the reign of gravity. The Rome monotypes mark his first attempt at formulating a series of abstract responses to a place other than Cape Ann, to a cultural rather than natural landscape. He later wrote,
My Rome monotypes have always been for me a sweeping representation of moments seized and shaped. The pictorial means employed was fresh and proven from a 2-year period of application. Although precise images of Roman sites lingered in my memory, anonymity of the invented visual elements plays upon the imagination and suggests the sense and texture of place. I was aware in these works of accurately directed personal forces serving the transformation of my observations from reality. I remember feeling that all had moved to my fingertips. It was the first time that the presence of my hand in my work made sense.
The studio at the American Academy was bare, except for a printing press and 2 cans of ink. With these, he immediately set about making the first of hundreds of monotypes. Spurred undoubtedly by the exuberance of being abroad, of being in Rome, Castagnacci committed these images to paper at a rate sometimes of 4 or 5 per day. He was a diarist of sorts, writing in color his responses to features of the city. The burly extravagance of Baroque facades, the procession along an apse or through an arcade, not too distantly reminiscent of Auber's nested squares. A glimpse into an open courtyard, shadows thrown by columns, the green of a shrub, fresh asparagus. They retain the verve of improvisation by which the artist keeps himself focused, quick, and responsive. And not surprisingly, Castagnacci is a long-standing jazz enthusiast. Their partly formed, partly inchoate quality is inseparable from their meaning. Seizing upon the features of place, the Rome monotypes become, in the process of translation to drawing in color, evocations of the momentariness of beauty in the mind.
For my Rome exhibit in 1988, I chose to make 10 variations based on a U-form theme. Kevin Brady wrote perceptively on these works, and this is part of what he said.
The Rome variations took Castagnacci even further afield in abstraction. They are more involved, more dense, even diagrammatic. Compared to his earlier work, the variations are less direct in terms of method and conception. Elements of landscape and architecture appear as abstract ciphers, coded figures of earth, sky, horizon, foliage, and marble. In succession, the variations progress toward increasing complexity of color, design, and mood. They add up to a story of sorts, playing out in a meta-language of pattern and facture, color, and boundaries. Like so much abstract art, they seem to be about nothing in particular and everything in general. If they seem to communicate no theme in particular, it is because they deal more broadly in theme complexes, without any single meaning, a layer of interconnected themes which evolve as the paintings progress and influence one another. They acquire meaning together as interrelated movements of a single suite. Our encounter with them, therefore, must be based on comparisons, and it is hardly possible to draw out just one or two threads without beginning to unravel the larger body of prior and subsequent work.
Collage often precedes or accompanies painting, my primary interest. As with drawing, the question is always, can I paint this? There is something pleasurable in the change of pace collage affords, and a sensuality inherent in the physical means as well as the substance of its materials. Then there is the economy factor. No wasted paint and great satisfaction in recycling previous effort by giving what failed on one level purposeful meaning on another. Unsuccessful monotypes from Rome in 1980 were rated for a series of works in 1996, titled Rome Again. I most recently found occasion to mine the same source for a series of variations on an Egyptian theme. Overprints of my works catalog cover of 96 provided material enough to fill 6 books with variations on the cover theme itself. There is potential for order latent in the casual and the inadvertent, and my effort in collage is directed toward finding it.
It is clear that Castagnacci intends the surface as a metaphor. The surface of painting, like the surface of water, may be identified with the surface of awareness, the mind in the act of finding what will suffice. The painting builds not only on layers of concealed paint, but untold formative experience whose effect is felt, but not seen. Each year since 1992, Castagnacci has left behind a little more of the landscape. What began as an erosion of boundaries in the later variations is taken even further as lands, sea, and sky meld into one continuous field of color and incident. The old rhetoric of the gridded brushstrokes, the leitmotif of the Cape Ann paintings, gives way to the new rhetoric of surface. The paintings of 1995 renounce any visible association with the landscape. The last traces of deceptive illusion are removed, along with distinctions between land, sea, and sky. These give way to one continuous field of color and surface incident. The brush behaves like wind, sliding, slapping, or merely grazing the surface. Particulars are overwhelmed by one delusion color within which other colors are inflected. It is its own kind of natural habitat, which, like a wood or a field, requires that we slow down and open rather than focus our attention. As such, Castagnacci seems to be moving toward a painting absolute, painting which evokes nothing beyond itself, whose own presence to the spectator is, or must be, full, final, and sufficient.
My visit to Egypt in early 1999 inspired a series of tactile variations, similar in constructive method to my 10 Rome variations of '87. Low relief gave the appropriate carved effect of weighted space I had known about and now had overwhelmingly experienced. I had my subject and could now confidently mine my past for an effective means. The impression made by this stereotomic culture seemed familiar, and details soon began to fall into place. In ancient Egypt, weight and space was the stuff of art long before other cultures considered them portentously in terms of concept and context. The constructed term stereotomia, in Greek meaning solid cut, both clearly defines a method and provokes speculation. The south upstairs window of my house in Gloucester opens onto a bend in the road. Casual sketches began to proliferate as the idea came more and more into focus for me. The paintings, however, did not commence until some time later, and the series of small acrylic on mylar works that emerged assumed the title Architectonic. The Four Corners variations reawakened me to myself. When somewhere along the conscious line of awareness, process and progress dissolve into one another, my tendency is to regain ontological bedrock. This is no more or less than a need to re-examine my past, to reformulate the present. Psychic archaeology was my term for this a while back, and continues to serve me now. In a Gloucester sketchbook numbered 2, a single drawn image, having already undergone a series of variational transformations, suddenly suggested to me the form of a classic pre-1400 Italian crucifix. And I recall thinking, Cimabue. It is hard ordering the tangible psychic processes that cause recognition and suggest viability regarding an idea's relevance and its developmental potential. Never mind that this sketch, begun in the early '90s and reworked a great deal since, was originally a representational landscape. A series of variations on mylar followed in tuche, gouache, acrylic, and black ink, imaginative equivalents to the original formal concept. With time, I've learned that while the generating sources behind any work may be of interest to others, They are unnecessary to a critical appreciation of the finished work. I had as yet no name with which to title these new works. I was only too aware of the historical significance of this iconography, and had so far failed to distance myself from its obvious and by now cloying specifics. Issues of representation remained, and this logistic increasingly overruled the formal concept. I was stuck with a cross and the conditions of its mandate. Realizing this, I could now justify things formally and shift all association to the irreducible tectonic joint and its all too visible consequences: four corners. Toying with the metaphorical potential of quarry, I began my most extended series of variations, choosing as a theme the back and front covers of my 1996 works catalog. Digging back in time while searching for an appropriate name for this project, I borrowed a title I had given to a previous series of paintings. And the 6 books and their numerous variational offspring became the current Notes from a Quarry, still in process. Selections from each of the books will show each cover theme followed by 2 variations. The variations are reworkings of Docutech copies of each original book. This experience has informed my paintings in ways both direct and rather circuitous, and somewhat hard to explain.